Welcome back to the Long Way Back podcast. I'm your host, Timmy Long, joined today by Donal Clifford. Donny, how are you?
Good.
Good. So today we have a guest from Carsavine. Don't run my second home, which is Valentia Island.
Which is Kevin's second home.
So it's Kevin Clancy. Kevin Clancy is the psychology outfit. No, the well-being outfit.
Well-being outfit, yeah.
The well-being outfit. Kevin is the face of the well-being outfit here in Ireland. And Kevin is a sports psychologist. He works with teams and individuals and helps them to grow and be better than what they can be. Do you know, better than what they are. So I hope I'm saying this right now.
You are. Well, you got a few things wrong there now to me. So saying that I'm from Carsavine.
I knew that would rub him up.
No, you tell me this. You tell me this. Where did you travel from today? No, but Kevin's a Cork man. He's a Cork man. Yeah. And you moved to Carsavine a number of years ago with your family.
Living in Carsavine, for the last couple of years, my family, yeah.
But it's great to have you here, and we're going to talk about all things today on sports psychology, psychology itself, and how we believe, the limitations that we have on ourselves, you know, based on our upbringing, things like that. And we're just going to talk about maybe team dynamics, coaches and parents, and how parents can help their kids to maybe progress and even enjoy sport. And I think that's the key word here, enjoy sport. You know, so give us a little bit of a background check on yourself, where you grew up and how you kind of moved into the sports psychology.
Everything that Timmy has got wrong there.
He got most of it right now, to be fair, apart from that bit at the beginning.
Yeah. But
so look, I grew up in Cork City, grew up in Turner's Cross. Absolutely like mad about sport from a young age. Played, watched, listened, like anything to do with sport, loved, but struggled with it myself. As a teenager, I just couldn't understand how guys who I knew I could be as good at as in a training session, for example, that I wasn't able to do it in a match situation. And like I was never going to be, I was never going to play with Cork or go to the Premiership or anything like that. But a lot of it was about how could I get more out of myself and understanding that. And that led me to have an interest in psychology. That was one of the main things that led me to have an interest in psychology. I also both my parents had gone back and had trained as psychotherapist as well, so psychology was in the house. But the area of sports psychology, like I discovered it in kind of my later teens, and I just decided I want to become a sports psychologist, and I did, and it took me a while to get there. And then I worked in sport for a number of years, and realised then got to a point around 2012, roughly around that time, where it was just me working in sport in Ireland. I didn't really have a business. I was kind of surviving on networks and referrals and things like that. So I kind of got to a crossroads where I either set it up as a proper business in Ireland or I went and did something different. And I decided to take a year and go to Australia and work on holiday visa. Ended up staying there 9 years. Jeez. Came back from there in 2022 with a wife and 2 kids. And
you're there for the whole COVID and whole
of COVID, everything. Yeah. We 2 kids during COVID. Yeah.
You were busy.
No family. We were busy. There was nothing else to do to me. Like, so,
Oh God! Whilst you were over in Australia, you started working with teams and different.
More on the corporate side of things. So I got more experience and working on the corporate side of things, and then I've come back and really now my work is split between working in sport, kind of more the elite level of sport, and working with corporate teams. So that's a little bit of my background, and
it's lovely having that variety. I'd say is that it's not just all of one thing. It's a passion, and maybe a passion, but not as much as sport is the passion, is it?
Sport is still the passion.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy working on the corporate side of things, and what I find is that like they complement each other a lot. So there's a lot of things that I've learned from sport that I can bring into a corporate environment, or vice versa as well.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you a question there. How do you integrate sports psychology into corporate motivational speaking and stuff like that? How does, like, I know it's probably easily answered, and I probably know the answer myself, like, but it's a big deal today, corporate speaking and working with corporates to motivate their teams. How does that work?
So I think the principles are the same. Like, my original training was actually in excuse me, it was in performance psychology. So a lot of the same principles are the same. Like, ultimately, whether you're dealing with a sports team or a business team, like, you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with people. So it's really about helping people to have an awareness or an understanding of themselves. Like, what are the things that they are bringing to the environment that are maybe helping the team or the group or the organization, and what are the things that are maybe getting in the way. And a lot of it is about helping to build that awareness, giving people tools, skills, strategies, challenging how people look at the world, like the beliefs, the lenses, the whatever way you want to put it, that they have. And I love operating in that world. Like, I love operating in a place where you're bringing people outside of their comfort zones. Like, you're challenging them, because I'm a firm believer that that's what I believe this myself, but I know the research and experience and everything will back it up. Like, if you're not operating in that space where you're stepping outside of your comfort zone on a regular basis, I mean, you're not
growing.
You're not growing.
No.
That's the key. And most people are too comfortable, and they don't want to feel fear, or they don't want to move into change.
Yeah.
And, you know, so when you're working with corporates, do you work with both their employees and their maybe structure, the HR department, or how they can help the employees to help the company even more?
Yeah.
And you go in and you start working with them. It's the same kind of dynamic. So really, as a club, you go into the club, you work with the coaches, you show them how you can actually improve the kids and make them happier, and give them more. So it's pretty much the same.
Like, I'd have even if I was to think about it from an individual perspective, and it then widens out to the team or to the wider organization. Like, I think about it as being like a pyramid where there's 3 key elements that you need to be thinking about all the time. So at the base of that pyramid is well-being, right? So somebody's individual well-being. So that's things like how well does somebody sleep, like their diet, like some of those basics, like their hydration, their identity, like how do they see themselves? Their mental health comes into that. Well-being is at the base of that. At the top of that is performance.
That's kind of the outcome, is it?
That's, well, it's kind of what you're trying to work towards. Yeah. The bit in the middle then is the environment that somebody is operating in.
Yeah.
So
it's
like,
very important.
Hugely. And like as human beings, we're a social creature. Like, we wouldn't have, our ancestors wouldn't have survived throughout evolution without other people. Like, we don't have, you know, we don't have, like, we're not particularly strong. We're not particularly fast. Like, we have the capacity
to do things together.
To
achieve.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the environment that you're operating in, and some people would say, look, and the research is a little bit sketchier on this, but some people would say that up to 70% of somebody's decisions or their beliefs, and I know you've spoken about this in the podcast as well, like, it's heavily influenced by the environment that you're operating in. So when I'm working with an individual or I'm working with a team, I'm trying to get an understanding, but if we take it from an individual, like, I'm trying to get an understanding at that base level. If somebody doesn't have that high level of well-being, if they're not taking care of some of those basic things, it's much more difficult to get that performance at the top.
Yeah.
But you're also looking at the environment. Like, does somebody feel like they belong in a particular environment? Like, is there psychological safety there? Like, can somebody feel like they can bring their full selves to whatever environment that they're operating? Because, and again, this is a big thing now in the corporate world at the minute, the way things are changing. If you have somebody in a job who feels like they can't bring their full selves, or they have to be somebody different.
Yeah. Inclusion.
Like, but think about that from an energy perspective. Like they're having to put energy into being something that they're not.
Yeah.
And like they're not going to be doing their job then as effectively as they possibly can. So the environment is huge, and somebody's perception of the demands that are being placed upon them in the environment are really, really important. So like I'm looking at those things always when I'm working with someone or working with teams, working with organizations as well.
So what if you have an environment, everything is cool, everything's going well, and you have maybe one bad egg in an environment and it's just disrupting? Do you recommend to maybe companies, maybe, listen, you have to look at this is kind of stopping everybody else from growing because there's this little bit of fucking poison and it's upsetting everything around them, you know? They're all ready to flourish, but you have this bit of knotweed here stopping everything from going, because you have individual players and you have team players. You need to keep team players with team players and individuals kind of separately and doing their own thing, because you know it and you know this. What would be the protocol there?
So starting point, I would say, like, if I think about it from a sports team perspective, and I think it translates
because
we know
as well. we have your Ronaldos in teams, you know, they're
stars,
absolutely great players, but they're also that bit of knotweed in teams too, where they can fucking you know, they can just upset the whole dynamic because it's all about me. You know.
So I would broadly think about it, right? And this has been very general here. If you have a team, we'll say, let's just say 30 players, right, in a team. Typically, you're going to get about a third of those who are going to be on board. They're going to do everything you want them to do. They're going to be just on it. Like that's that's almost like their personality or the characteristics they bring. The other side, you're probably going to get another third who are probably going to be difficult. They're going to need to be dragged along, and then you're going to get a big group in the middle. Right. Like what you're trying to do as much as possible is, if you create the environment, the culture, that you're dragging all those levels up, so the people who are at the bottom, who are maybe more difficult, they're kind of moving into that centerpiece where people are kind of on the fence about things. You're trying to bring them along with you. I would be thinking about, you do that first. Like that's the starting point. And now to do that, you need to be very, very clear about, like, why are we here? Like who do we want to be as a team? I think one of the biggest shifts that I've made in my time as a sports psychologist over 15 years, like when I came out of university, done my master's, like the prevailing belief around, if you're working with a team or even if you're working with an individual, was the goal was all important. Like you had people work towards a goal and then you just, like, it was like, you know, the light on the top of the hill, like whatever barriers, we're going to find our way to the top of the hill. And over time, what I've realized is that's a mistake. That it actually is much better to think about, like, who do we want to be as a group? Like, what do we want to stand for?
That's powerful.
What do we want our identity to be as a group? Because, well, a number of reasons for this, right? If you're just completely focused on, you know, we want to win an All-Ireland, or we want to win a rugby championship, or we want to win the World Cup or the Premiership or whatever, you could do everything possible and do all the right things, and you mightn't, like, you could have a bit of luck go against you. Or
I'll give you an example. It probably was something that you posted before. I'll be following your stuff. But I remember there was an article, I'm pretty sure you posted, so you tell me if you did or not, that there was an experiment done in a school around kids and art, and one half of the kids were given a prize for doing art. Did you hear about this? And the other half were just doing art for the sake of doing art. And basically, to summarize it, it was the kids who did the art just for the sake of doing it stayed doing it much longer, whereas the other kids who got their prize gave up doing art. But the purpose, what your man was saying was, do you remember posting this? it's somewhat vague.
I know the research in these areas. I know what you're talking about.
Basically, he was saying,
I should be taking the credit for this. Like,
but basically,
would you believe in it though?
Yeah. But basically, what he was saying was like that you fall in love with the process, not with the goal. So, like for example, I'm always saying I go fly fishing. There's been loads of days I went out 8, 10, 12 hours on a boat. Haven't got nothing, blank. But I love practicing my skill of it's like a craft of being of fly fishing. It's not I'm sitting there all day just kind of oh Jesus Christ. It's trying to get that cast right, trying to get your fly right, trying to get all these little bits and pieces right, and
for the end goal.
It's not even the end goal. Like the end goal might never come. It might. It's I don't know. Is there ever? It's what I love about it is I get time for me and I get time to. It's something I have to keep practicing and developing.
Isn't the end goal just being on the river though?
That's it.
Isn't it?
But that's it.
It's not even about catching the fish.
But for me, like I'm involved with a team of young girls. I love it. Absolutely love it. But I'm not invested in picking the team or winning a championship. I love the process of seeing girls coming to training, having a bit of, I'll say, shits and giggles, just kind of being stupid on the pitch at times, and they get me to do fucking weird stuff like. But having that crack with them and watching young girls grow, and kind of seeing in 10 years' time what will they be doing, and can I contribute to that in some way? Does that kind of make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. So there's a story that comes to mind for me actually that kind of demonstrates this idea. Victoria Pendleton was this, I don't know if you've ever heard of her now, but she was a British track cyclist. And she was kind of
she was powerful back in the day.
Very, very powerful. Like, yeah. So she went to Athens, I think in 2004 as like the favourite to win gold. And she didn't win gold. Yeah. So then she spoke about this afterwards. She made it like, and you have to do this when you're an elite athlete, like her whole focus for the next 4 years was she wanted to get up and get that medal, be up on the podium in Beijing. And she did it. She won the gold medal. And she spoke about how she was standing on the podium, like at what should have been, probably the highest point of her life. Yeah. And the national anthem was playing. And she said, it just dawned on her, what am I going to do now? Like, what's going to drive me now? And I'm simplifying it here now a little bit, but she essentially fell into a depression after that, which is not uncommon for Olympic athletes. Yeah. And again, that's another reason I come back to this idea of if it's just solely focused on the outcome, it's actually a distraction, the outcome. Like that's the kind of ironic thing as well about it. Like if you're on a pitch or on a racetrack or whatever, and you're thinking about the outcome, you're not focused on what you want to do. In my experience, people can get their head around that. Like they can get their head around that idea, and it's a very simple idea. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to actually do that though. Like when the pressure is at its greatest, and you need to just be locked into what's my next task, and then after you do that task, well, what's my next task again? So, after this,
good man, because that's something you're passionate about. Mindfulness.
Mindfulness, yes.
There you go. Would that tie into that?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you explain a small bit? Because myself and Tim, you're big into mindfulness.
I'm aware of that. Yeah.
So are you. So will you maybe help us, for people maybe who'll be listening, how do you use mindfulness for that, to bring that focus?
So for me, if I was to describe to somebody what mindfulness is, like it's essentially bringing your attention back to something again and again and again. Like that's, people talk about practicing mindfulness, which is a great term for it because it's a practice. Yeah. So it's basically that ability, like our mind, we can call it the monkey mind or we can call it whatever, like will naturally gravitate to, it'll naturally run away and think about what's happening in the future or what am I going to have for dinner later or whatever it is. Yeah. And it's that ability, like just like a muscle, if you were building your bicep muscle, you'd work on it, you'd flex it. It's the same thing with mindfulness, focus. It's just bringing that ability back to what's the task at hand here? What do I need to focus on? What's the intention? Exactly. Yeah.
And allowing everything as is.
Exactly.
Just be with no judgment.
Yes.
And it's just, and every time the head goes off into thinking, it's about bringing it back into the breath or
The moment.
with compassion
Exactly.
for you.
Yes.
So for example, if you're focused around maybe hitting the ball over the bar and your head is on the phone, you're training or whatever, you have to bring it back. Just consistently bringing it back into the now, even though there's something and the way that works in your normal life is through the actual practice. And I love what you said there. Practice. It's because mindfulness is a practice like a job.
It is.
It's not meditation. There's mindfulness meditation, but to be really in the meditative state, you have to really practice mindfulness a lot and build up a consistent kind of routine of practicing maybe once or twice a day. And what that gives you then is it gives you this form of integration of your practice into your daily life.
Exactly.
And you just become aware, and instead of losing yourself in going down a rabbit hole on a website around God knows what, you'll just become aware automatically, and you'll bring yourself back to maybe the stuff that's at hand, the email or the message,
Or the practicing kicking or shooting or
it's the
whatever
same,
your job is at that moment.
Yeah.
mindfulness is key.
Yeah, and I actually think about mindfulness in I kind of break it into two different ways of doing it, right? So that's formal mindfulness, which is the meditation. You sit and you practice, and you do a body scan, or you do an open awareness, or you listen to a track around that or whatever. And in the informal piece, and actually from my own personal experience, I'm actually really good at the formal stuff. Like I can sit for a particular time every day and do that. The big challenge for me, and the big challenge I know from working with people as well, is the informal part. Like,
And I like that one.
there you go.
I just roll with whatever is. I just sit there and whatever is, I'm just aware of it. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, and so I know, and the thing that I've noticed in my life with it is I've gotten better. Like I've gotten better at the informal from the formal. Like I think you mentioned it there, but it kind of, it almost like bleeds into your life, like even without you even being aware of it. But it's really challenging, like, and it's, like, and that's what fascinates me about sport. And like, you look at the Olympics, or you look at, I'm trying to think of an example, like even like someone like Rhys McGlenaghan, the gymnastics at the Olympics. Now, I know nothing about gymnastics. I've never worked in it, right? But I watched him 4 years ago, and he does this routine up in the
he came close.
pommel horse.
Horse,
That's what it's called.
yeah.
Like, can you imagine for him 4 years ago, he went in again as like he was the raging hot favourite to win gold. Didn't work out for me, made a technical mistake. Like a tiny little technical mistake, from my understanding.
Yep.
And he's gone in again then like a few months ago now at this stage in Paris. And like the psychology involved in that, and the ability for him
focused.
Yeah, to be focused, like
completely.
So if you get too caught up then in that, if he's not just focused on, okay, I have my routine to help me before I get there. When I get there, I need to just zone in,
switch it on.
Yeah, and then I need to let it go as well, which is another like kind of.
What would your job, right, be 4 years ago when he made that technical mistake? What would your job be within those 4 years to build him up to Paris this year and to win it?
Timmy, you're on fire.
Jesus,
today with
Timmy, I was
these
going to
questions,
say, that's a great
That's
question.
a great question.
This is your first rodeo.
Because it is your job as much as his.
Absolutely,
and he needs to listen to you and trust you.
Yeah.
And you need to get that 5 minutes of being on the
Absolutely, yeah.
out of his head and get him focused on the next 4 years. What's the whole process? Like,
So
start off slow, obviously, I'm presuming.
Well, what you do is you'd actually break it down, right? So if you look at a 4-year Olympic cycle, for example, like along the way there'll be a world championships, or there'll be European championships, or there'll be particular meets or whatever. Like, so you have different flag points along the way, and you'd basically try and break it down as much as possible so that you're working with him around what does he actually need to do in his next training session, like, and what does he need to do in this particular part of his next training session. You'd also get a bit of an understanding of what happened, obviously. Like, was it something psychological? Was it something technical that happened? And a big part, and I think this is extremely important and it's underappreciated, is you would work with all of the other people around him.
Yeah.
So, like, you think about any elite athlete, any elite team, like, you could have 10, 15, 20 in some cases, like different specialists between doctors, physios, dietitians, you know, particular technical coaches, whatever, working around an athlete. So, like, how do you make sure that that team
is on the same page?
And is functioning? And I think it's something that's really, really underappreciated. There's Gary Keegan, who's an incredible guy who did a lot of work in Irish boxing, would have set up Irish boxing back along, worked with the Sport Ireland Institute. He's doing a lot of work in rugby, the Irish rugby team at the minute. Gary always used to talk, when he worked with the Institute, about, like, everybody involved is a performer, right? So the coach is a performer, the psychologist is a performer, the nutritionist. So, like, it's not just the athletes who have to go out and perform. Like, we all have to be
contribute to their energy to some degree. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, and thinking about, like, how am I getting better? Like, am I doing the right things in terms of dealing with this athlete?
Or am I doing my job to help them get their goal? Whatever that. 100%.
Who's challenging me? Like, who's pushing me out of my comfort zone? Because, like you mentioned earlier, Tim, you're absolutely right. Like we just like staying in our comfort zone, like, and we're kind of wired like that as humans in some ways, because it's comfortable and it's safe, and there's
no dodgy feelings.
No, there's none of those uncomfortable emotions and all that.
And when you're not in your comfort zone, there's loads of them.
Exactly.
And I suppose, tying into it, am I in it for the right reason? Am I in it for Kevin's benefit because Kevin is the Olympian here, or hopefully Kevin, just still time.
Still hope.
Or am I in it for my own reasons? Is it something that I'm in it for myself, which you'll see a lot in kind of amateur sports, where people get into it for their own reasons and push their own agenda, and that's not helpful then to the overall benefit of the athlete or the team, or
that's very,
and it's just even checking what's my goal here, do you know?
Well, and look, I think particularly in team sports, but even individual sports, like, what's really important is, like, we are driven or wired as human beings to be, and again, going back to our evolution, like, we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to be contributing to something bigger than ourselves. So how do you create that for a group? Like, or how, I even shouldn't say how do you create that for a group, how do you get a group to create that for themselves? Because again, if you go back, like, it's very, very different if a coach or a leader or whoever is coming in and saying, this is what our purpose is, and this is our key behaviors or values or whatever we want to be, versus the team actually develops that themselves. Because that's the piece of something's been imposed upon you versus it's actually coming from intrinsically from yourself.
Like, I'd say a point to that might be, I was involved in a country team growing up in a parish, and it was very much about your club. Like, it was your club. I don't have that very same sense in city teams or in big town teams. It's almost like it's not my parish. It's kind of like we go and do something as opposed to really belonging to something. Do you know, am I making sense? No, that's my experience of it. I'm not saying I'm right, but I would see the difference between a country team where it's my parish and we're all so close, and we're all, even though you don't fucking like Johnny down the road because he stole 2 hectares of your land, but you still have that sense of community. Whereas in a city team, I think that's a bit, it's not as tight. Would you?
I disagree with you.
Would you?
I know the city team you're talking about.
I think I understand what he's saying, but if it was soccer now, I would definitely agree with him, because there's no loyalty in soccer. The fellas change teams, but when it comes to GAA, like, I know fellas who are up there with Vincent's 20 years, and they wouldn't fucking step outside Vincent's. The same thing doesn't go with soccer, I think. What do you think?
No, I think it's a really interesting one in the GAA, because in some ways, it's the thing that sets the GA apart, like that kind of community feeling, that kind of thing of, you know, a guy could be playing up in Crow Park in front of 80,000 people one Sunday, and then the next week he's playing in the, you know, for his club in the local field. Like, there's something really special about that. It's how do you marry that up as well with, like, there's a real appetite now for fellas and girls and to just be the best that they can be. And that's the same for coaches and things like that. So I think you're getting a little bit, you're seeing more and more of that of coaches moving from one place to another and kind of helping out there. And I don't know how you go about that. But like I would say, like I grew up in Nemo. Don't know where you were from. Like when I was growing up in Nemo, and this had been the philosophy in the club for years, even decades probably before I was there, was like there was never an emphasis put on winning at underage level. Never an emphasis. Like,
great model.
It's a great model. And like I can remember our Fela team under 14. I was actually captain of our Fela football team, and we played St. Nick's, so the Glens football equivalent, in I think it was a city semi-final down in Ballinlough, and they beat us by like 40 points, like wiped the floor with us. But yet that age group, 4 years on, the Cork minor football team won the All-Ireland that year. We had 3 guys on that panel from that team, and St. Nick's had nobody. Now, I'm not saying necessarily St. Nick's were wrong, and you know, they may have had fellas in the Cork minor hurling panel, but the point I'm making, and I see it a lot now, and I don't work as much in underage, particularly with clubs, but like, you get the coaches who want to be, you know, they want to be Jurgen Klopp, the under 10 team or under 11 team or whatever, like, and it's that's not what's needed at that level, in my opinion. Like, it should be about, can we have enjoyment? Can we retain as many players as possible? And not everybody's going to go on and, you know, play with Cork or go to the Premiership or play with Cork City or whoever else. But like, those people will be the people who will, you know, be the referees in your club or be future coaches in your club.
That's, I think that part is very important. How do we get kids from like an under 10 age, as opposed to, say, them drifting away from a club? And like my key age is 16. If you can get them to 16 and they're still good involved in a club, you got them over a big hump. Well, how do we get them then and keep them safe, get them to 16, that we keep them involved and say get them invested in the club that they're a part of? And I suppose that's kind of my question for you. Yeah.
So I would think about that at various different levels. Like I would think about it from the club themselves. Like, how many clubs around the country in any code like actually have a vision for themselves? This is who we want to be. This is what we want to represent. This is what we want to stand for. And not only that, then, like, because I mean, a vision is only as good as how it's actually implemented. But like, if you have that, like, that should, in an ideal world, filter down. And you have policies like, if I had my way in the morning, I would make it, I would keep competitions there for underage, because I think there is an element of competitions are important and they challenge people. But in terms of the emphasis put on winning or having players of the year at under 11 and under 12, I forget about it. Like it should be about enjoyment. And
I have 2 questions for you.
I have 2 as well after that.
The first one is 2 lads growing up anywhere in the city, maybe a rough area, you know, just look beyond the dynamics of the family and everything else. One's involved in GA, one's involved in soccer. I know a lot of lads that grew up rough and tough, like, and they were in the GA, and like, they never went down the same road as the likes of us, who the other fellas who were in the boxing or the soccer. You know, you mentioned, and where this question is coming from is you said something about community. There's a lot more community and looking out for each other in the GA than there would be in a lot of the other kind of clubs. You know, like, they don't give up on fellas that fast. You know, we all fuck up, you know, we all make mistakes, but I noticed that the GA side of us, they kind of look after a little bit more. Would you agree with me there? And the other side then is, this is going This is a trick question now. It's not a trick question, but we might get a bit of shit over it. Should coaches be coaches if they have a child on the team, be managers on a team, a GA team, a football team? It doesn't matter what it is.
Fuck me, Timmy.
It's a reason.
Put me in a tough spot. No,
but it's an important question because I've seen teams. I've seen teams crumble because of situations like this, because coaches having kids on the team and preference always being
their own agenda.
Do you know? And listen, sometimes, and I'm going to be honest here, sometimes maybe coaches not having preference over their own child, and the child falling out with the father because they're not being picked. The opposite side of it.
Of course, yeah, works both ways.
So I don't know. I don't know. It's always been a question that I've had around clubs and managers of clubs having a child on the panel, and maybe the child not being good enough. And if they are good enough, great. But there's always going to be that bit of bias there.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think? You know?
So look, I think it's a great question. I don't think there's a straight answer to it.
There's not a straight answer.
No.
But in your own personal opinion, do you think it's a great idea? You know, because in every case I've seen, it has always caused issues. In every case.
Not always.
I've
seen some really good people who are steady and
but I think I know exactly where you're coming from with the question. I think so in an ideal world, right, you might say, look, wouldn't it be great if that wasn't the case? Like if parents weren't involved as the coach, right, in an ideal world. But like the practicalities of it as well. Like I know, you know, you talk to people in various different sports, like clubs are struggling to get coaches and attract coaches, and so it makes sense, like just from a practical perspective, the parents are dropping the kids off, the parents might be standing on the side, and anyway, you know, why can't you fall in and coach? But I know exactly where you're coming from.
And it's no real kind of, it wasn't a dig at anybody, because
no, it's a good question.
All it is just
it comes up regular.
Something that I've noticed. My kids are young, and they've been in sports since they're young, and I've seen it. I've seen it with different clubs, and not picking any club in particular, but
I would have been the same view of you.
This happens in everything, every sport, no, not just soccer and GA.
I'll give you an example, right? So when I did my masters, I went and I did work experience. Very fortunate. It was an incredible experience. I went over to IMG academies. So they're some of the biggest academies in the world. Like they have the Bollettieri tennis academy that Sharapova and Agassi and all these great players came out of, and they do the NFL combine, the American football, and they do soccer, and they do various different ones. Anyway, I spent 3 months at a place called the Everett. So Chris Everett is a famous American female tennis player, her academy in Florida. And like, it was eye-opening to just see, like, you had kids there, a lot of kids at the time from Eastern Europe, who would have been identified at a young age, like, and I'm talking like 10, 11, 12 years of age, that
talent.
This kid is going to be the next big thing, like, you know, as the number one junior tennis player in the world, whatever. And the family would have moved lock, stock and barrel from their home country to come to one of these academies. And you think about like the kid and the pressure that's on that kid straight away. But they even, and this is going back probably 15 years ago, like there was protocols in place at the academy that around the parents, that they couldn't be, you know, they could observe matches or training, but they had to observe them from a distance. They couldn't come and, you know, give the coach advice or anything like that, because they recognized there that the dynamics at play there were just not great. And you like, there's stories, and I'm going to use in tennis an example, like Andre Agassi wrote a book about like his father, like it was on the verge of, you know, abusiveness, like Steffi Graf, similar things. Like it's a common enough one. Jelena Dokic as well has spoken about the trauma that her father caused her as his coach. So I think it's a really, really important one. And I'm using examples there now at the elite level, but it's a really important one. But I think it just comes up against the practicalities of
dropping kids, and if you have 3 or 4 kids, and I know in my club there, it's the same as yours, Nemo. I swear, genuinely, my daughters have done really well in that club. Like, they really have. It's contributed a lot to their own growth and development. But you do see areas then where they're kind of like, I'm not sure is that working so well.
Yeah.
But you'll see it more with individuals, and like the club ethos and the club kind of policy would be like that you put the kids first. But you're dealing with, like, our club doesn't at all struggle with coaches. Like, we have a fortune of people volunteering, probably too many. But you do have the odd one then, and you'll have that in every walk of life, every sport, every area of life. Somebody who maybe hasn't checked themselves and see what's my motivation here, or maybe what am I contributing or not contributing to this child or this team or this.
Yeah, and I actually think there's a huge opportunity for sports as well, right? I think what tends to happen, actually the soccer does this really well, like in terms of coach education and development. Like, if somebody decides, you know what, I really love coaching, I want to get into it, I want to get better at it, I want to improve, I want to grow. Like, there's a very definite pathway in soccer, like with the FAI, and from what I'm led to believe, it's an excellent pathway as well. Like I think there's a huge opportunity there for sports to say, do you know what, we're going to take a group of 20 people every year or whatever it is, and we're actually going to put a little bit of investment around it. And it wouldn't have to be huge investment, and we're actually going to try and develop these groups of people and develop these people as coaches, and put our trust that if we put our time and investment into them, that they'll
give it back.
They'll give it back then. Exactly.
I think hurling is, and they are now this year about, in the hurling, they're on about trying something like that they need to invest more in hurling. I think they need to invest in football. But hurling, I think they're on about, because there's only a certain amount of counties who are competing at a higher level. So that's
and even across the board, like I would say in multiple sports, like there's a great opportunity there to help people, because you'll as a coach, then you will learn skills that will help you in the sport, but they'll also help you in life as well. Absolutely, yeah. So
can I interrupt? Coming away from Timmy's question, I guess when he had that question, I had one as well. It was really burning.
You said you had 2.
This is my primary one.
He's going to put all this stuff into practice now inside in his psychotherapy rooms as well.
So
should be charging him for the inside.
That's why I got him on. So, for example, we'll say GA, amateur sport, will always be an amateur sport. Never really going to make a career out of it in any way, shape or form, the majority of people. So it's more about enjoying it and being competitive and getting all of the skills and life skills that come with being part of a team. Do you agree with that? So how then do I help? And I'm going to ask this question for myself, because I'd say this goes on in lots and lots of clubs, okay? I'm not invested in any player being in an All-Ireland. I'm only underage. It's how do I help the kids stay safe, stay part of something, and maybe have a better career, that they might want to go on and be a carpenter. They might want to go on and but not just be a carpenter, but be a good carpenter and like skilled in their work and take pride in their work, or be a doctor, or be, I don't care what, but how do I help a person transition? How can I take something out of GA or any sport and help them just become a better person?
Okay, it's a great question.
Thank you. It's stewing for a while.
So a few things, right? So first, and again, I go back to the idea of the coach as a performer. Like, I would always be saying, like, what are you bringing to the table? So, like how organized are you for the session, for example, right?
Yeah.
How are you preparing yourself for the session? Like, I'd work with coaches, like we spoke about mindfulness earlier, who would do their own like meditation to get themselves into the right frame of mind to go out and to work with a group. So like, what's the energy that you're bringing into that situation? I think a key part then, if you're talking about particularly again at underage, or where people are playing it more recreationally, or you may get some people in the group who may end up going on and playing in All-Irelands, whatever. You want to make it enjoyable, but you also want to make it that you're looking at challenging people, and you're looking at getting people, again, use that stepping outside of their comfort zone a little bit. Now that can be really, really difficult like that's easy for me to say if I'm going in working with an inter-county team where you're looking to get like, the last 0.5% of the people, you're going to be dealing with people at various different levels in a club situation. But there are some of the things that should be in your mind of like, how do I make this fun? How do I make it enjoyable? And how can I now challenge people? And a key part of it, and ultimately this is what coaching is relationships. Like what's the relationship that you have with people there? Like, and how do you invest in that relationship? And in a situation like that, like, how do you get to know what else is going on in that person's life? Do they play another sport? Like, how's school going for them, their kids, or that kind of thing? And I really think that's the piece. And even if I look at like organizations or corporate environments, like you look at the trends in terms of work now, like at a kind of a global level, like the World Economic Forum, they've been saying this, they do these reports every couple of years where they look at basically everything, like the state of work around the world. And they've been saying for a number of years now that the skills that are most valued, they do like the 10 most valued skills in the workplace or the 15 most valued skills in the workplace. The skills that are increasingly more valued in the workplace are the traditional soft skills, like the emotional intelligence, like your ability to influence somebody, your
Support.
ability, your ability to persuade someone, helping somebody create an environment where people can be more creative, more innovative. They're the things that they're the hard skills now with artificial intelligence and all this coming in. Like that's going to take care of.
That's powerful.
Yeah. So it's thinking about those skills and like
that's a great way to put it. Like the soft skills that were always looked upon as something that wasn't needed and hard work and labour was, and then now with the improvements in technology, they're doing the hard work.
Yeah.
Now we're going back to the soft skills and just moving people on and helping them to kind of.
It's the human skills.
Yeah.
Like, it's the human pieces. So
how do we be human?
Yeah,
that's the question.
Yeah, but then I bring back, like, for me, sport is a incredible learning ground for that because, like, you're gonna lose games, right? Things are gonna go wrong for you. You're gonna make mistakes. Like, you look at. I was at the All-Ireland hurling final this year. Incredible game, right? But littered with mistakes everywhere. Like, so. Like, and that's the nature of it. Like, so it's going to be how can people learn how to respond to those, and that can be taken in into other areas of your life. Like, I think that's where there's huge power in coaches, rather than thinking we need to win the under-12 cup or league or whatever.
Yeah, it's important.
It's not. It really isn't. Like what kind of an environment are we creating there? And I think then the philosophy of the club and all that kind of stuff feeds into that too.
Yeah.
So I suppose that answer your question.
It does, but it does. It really does, and there's a bit more. So, for example, we're up here in the north side of Cork City, okay, and there's a couple of clubs around us, and I'd say the lot of kind of the people that we would work with, and we kind of hoping to be helping. They're not all driven by school. By education. And like when I hear, I think it's something that kind of grates on me a little is, why can't they teach this in schools? Why can't they teach this in schools? And the amount of things they should be teaching in schools, the kids would never they'd never get to leave school. They wouldn't, like. But these are things that our communities can do. And like, for example, it's up here on the north side, we've no college up here. Sure you don't? There is the college up here.
A few steps down college, you have Farm Forest below, I think. You might have. Kind of a lot there for education. Exactly.
But how do we kind of, maybe people in clubs up here who are young, how do the clubs kind of help those people to maybe, is my question making sense? To kind of get further on in life, that they don't see it as a limit, like you say, they're kind of starter colleges, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to colleges, but they're not going to get a degree or the masters out of it and kind of move on and do something, say, like you want to do. How could we help kids kind of see that side of themselves, that there's more to me than just what I'm going to learn in school, that I can learn soft skills here in my club? Or is that making sense in my question? Yeah.
So I think, and actually I was saying to you earlier, Timmy, I was listening to the episode you did with Tommy, and like even your own experiences at school and things like that, I thought were really interesting. Like, I think one of the things we need to do is we need to recognize that there's, you know, we like everybody talks about IQ, and then kind of everything is built around IQ, and, you know, the academic system is sort of built around that whole thing. And if you fit into that, great. But like, there's loads of people that don't fit into that, but that have other capabilities that are incredible. I'm thinking of
skills,
other skills. I'm thinking of a very good friend of mine who, like, wouldn't have been academically very good at all, but like could pick up like a snooker cue, having never played the game, and be really good at it, or a basketball, or, you know what I mean, that there's different forms of intelligence. So I think like there's a story there around that. Now I think as well, I would hope the workplace, that things are changing in that regard. Like I there was a number of years ago there where, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago at this stage, where some of the big 4 accounting firms actually started to say, you don't need to have a 3rd level degree to work there anymore, which had always been the case. Like, you needed to go and get a university degree, or, you know, go to CIT or MTU or whatever it is now, and get your degree, and then you might get a job in there. Like, that was a base requirement. They said no, because they're realizing that actually to do the work now, we often talk when we're working with corporate clients about, like, we're operating in a wicked working environment. And by that I mean, like, there's no real rules. Like, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of grey. Like, it is about people having to think on their feet and adapt and be creative and be innovative and work together and disagree about things. Like, they're not things that you necessarily just get taught in a school. Like, they're things you learn in sport. And so I think, circling back to your question, I think it's like, we need to recognize that and say, everybody's got different abilities. Like, everybody's got different capabilities, and we need to be using, I think storytelling is very powerful. So like dyslexia, for example. I know you spoke about dyslexia in that podcast. Like, Richard Branson has dyslexia. Right? So
ADHD is all he has.
ADHD, yeah. Kieran Donaghy, who just coached the Armagh team to win the All-Ireland of football, and won multiple All-Irelands himself as a player, and played basketball. Dyslexia. Like, he tried to write his own book, and he spoke about it publicly, about how he struggled with that. Like, they're bringing something completely different to the table as well. So I think those stories need to be out there.
People need to hear them.
Yeah, exactly, like that. You know, like that people, like the work that you're doing, Timmy, like coming from here, you're I'm trying to think of what the word is. Like, you're a role model for people. Like Paddy O'Shea, who I know from Vincent's, like,
Donal knows him well too.
Gentleman, absolute gentleman.
Yeah. Like, they're people. Like, Paddy's an All-Ireland medal in his back pocket. He's goalkeeping coach now for the Cork senior football team. Fantastic guy, great guy. Like, the more we can get stories like that out there, and the more you can show people a path that this is possible. Like, you know, this person,
no matter where you're from,
no matter where you're from,
with the right guidance. Guidance is key in having the right figures in your life as well as a young person. Like, and I'm going to just kind of give a few examples of maybe having the right guidance. You know, let's say, just for example, and when we had a conversation a few weeks ago there in Mountain Alley, I brought this story up about having young people with the right guidance in their life, maybe not as half as good as somebody that doesn't have the right guidance in their life, making it professionally in either soccer or boxing or whatever. But we have so much talent in this, talent that's just oozing out of young people up here in soccer, boxing, GA, and not having the right guidance, just not having the right figures in their lives, and hitting a certain age, then maybe 13, 14, and going down the wrong route because they're finding something that allows them to feel better in themselves
at that time. You
know, and that might be alcohol, might be drugs, might be criminality. There's so many different things, and it stunts the ability to go on and be a role model, a future role model, because of being a professional athlete in some way. But the issue is, some of the adult figures in their lives don't understand what it takes to be able to help them to move forward and to give them the motivation and just to be behind them and just give them that, not push, but little whisper in their eye every time that they're struggling, saying, do you know what, you're good enough. You can do this. And there's a few young lads now in the area that I know in particular, like, who are talented boxers, like, and I mean talented. They didn't have it easy, right? They did not have it easy either. And they're going down the wrong road, and it's fucking awful to see it happening. Do you know? Because my own young fella, he knows him well, and you know, it's tough. And I know because of my own experiences growing up that there's probably no one going to hold them back now at this stage. Do you know what I mean? It's gone into that space where they're just going to have to live it out. And
sounds Jesus.
You know,
I really know what you mean, but the way you're describing it sounds very bleak. But I do agree with you.
Yeah, it's not bleak. When I say live it out, I mean just go down that road and come out the other side. Like
that road for a lot of kids, they don't come out that other side.
You know,
that's the problem.
And it's fucking awful.
Not
that happens a lot. Not just here. It happens all over the city, everywhere. Fucking
to different degrees.
Yeah, to different degrees, don't it? Yeah, but it's fuckers, and there's no real answer for that either. I know that.
No, there's no answer for that. But what I would say on that is, like, and again, I go back to the environment piece, right? Like, and it's like you as an example, or you know, like, if you can create an environment even for a small group, like, or you can develop something like that can grow quite quickly. Like the example now, and I know it's a totally different context, right? But like what they've done in rowing in Skibbereen, like that was basically one guy, right? Who, you know, was involved in the rowing club there and developed it, and now like it grows and it becomes kind of something that people can aspire to. Like the Irish boxing program, like I've mentioned Gary Keegan already. Like when Gary went in and took that over, like it was on its knees, and then it became something that people could aspire towards. And you're never going to, unless you go about tackling the whole societal and, you know, community thing, like you're never going to get to everyone.
No.
But then as like it comes back to like what can people do as individuals?
Exactly.
Like, how can we create something for the small maybe area or group of people that we have?
And I think we're actually
100%.
doing it.
You're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. We're actually doing it, because if there is somebody listening that has maybe youth going through the same stuff as, it's just about, all it is really is just telling them that they're good enough, telling them what
it is. But then there's I think there's a little more to it. I definitely agree, it is telling them, but then like you'll have some people out there and they'll have blind spots. And it's the blind spots that, like, because I know for a child, you can praise them 110. You can 99 times you can praise them. The one time you go, oh, Jesus Christ. They kind of go, okay, that's proof or evidence now of what I already believe about myself.
Okay.
Do you get me? So it's very fine for a child, but it's kind of, I would be hoping that if we can give it to the adults to say, just maybe be a bit more mindful of how you're coaching and develop a coaching skill yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean coaching as in the skills, but coaching as in like what you do, Kevin. I really admire what you do. It's getting to that mental piece. I remember I had a chat with somebody during it, and there was a match, and I wasn't in the team, but they did really well. Really, really well. And I said, Jesus, they've turned it on. And the following week then it's like they turned it off. But I could see it was just their mentality, and they were missing, and they were just doing things that they did not do a week or two before. But you can see it was something in their psyche. So 1 week they were really good and they were switched on, and then 2 weeks later it's like they forgot what they'd done 2 weeks ago. Am I making sense?
You are.
So it's the getting somebody into a, like I might be coaching kids, but it's not the skills I'd be coaching them and how to solo and kick. It's kind of getting their head in it and having the confidence and the belief that they want to come back, and I am good and I am improving, and you know.
Yeah,
and I think you touched on an important point there about, like, it's not just about telling people how great they are. Now that is important. Like the positives are important, and again, like in terms of how our brains work, like we have a negativity bias, like so we're wired as humans, again going back, like we needed to pay attention to the things that were a threat to us. So it's an important function that we have. But it means that we can just zone in. Like it's much easier to identify problems than it is to identify what somebody's actually doing well. There's a thing actually in sport. This is just a theory and idea I developed myself, called I call it the 95-5 principle. That particularly as you go up the levels in sport, generally when somebody goes out to perform or train or whatever, like 95% of the things they'll do will be in the kind of average to good to very good to excellent range, and 5% will be in the not so good range. And yet most people will spend then an inordinate amount of time on that 5%. I did this wrong, or I didn't do this. So it is important that you do focus in on the positive things. And it annoys me a little bit with, self-help and things like that, because as people say, oh, you just need to think positively, as if it's the easiest thing in the world to do. It's actually really, really difficult to think positively. Like it goes against our wiring. Like we have to, it's almost like you were saying earlier to me about mindfulness, like there's a practice to that as well. But I also think, like as a coach or even as an individual, like, and this might sound like a bit of a cliche psychology thing to say, like you want to think about how are you creating a high support, high challenge environment, right? So it's almost like asking yourself always, am I giving this person enough of the support, like enough of the tools, the training, whatever it is that they need? But at the same time, am I pushing them? Am I challenging them? Like, and it does worry me about a little bit. Again, we're going back to kind of youth sport. This thing of like the participation thing, and everybody gets a medal. Like,
no, I don't agree with that.
No, like like if like by its nature, if you want somebody to develop resilience, and you need resilience in the world, regardless of who you are or where you've come from, you need resilience. Like you need to. You need to be pushed.
You need to manage failure.
Yeah, exactly.
You do. Everyone fails, but you need to manage it. It's how do I manage it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's the right way to manage failure?
I think you need to learn from it, right? I think, and this is really difficult to do, and I know this even myself from even studying this and doing this for a number of years. You need to be very objective with it, particularly and I'm talking about. Like
that makes sense.
Like in sport in particular, like you need to be very, very black and white about what happened, what impact did this have, and then as part of that, then as well, you need to manage the emotional side of it. Like
sometimes failure comes from not preparing properly,
of course,
for whatever task may be or whatever you're doing, and there's no point in going into something. And I always say this to my son. I say, Jay, if he's training for a fight or whatever, I say, don't leave anything behind. Don't leave anything behind. If you're going into that ring, just know that you've done absolutely everything that you could possibly do for you to win the fight today. And whether you win, lose or draw, whatever it may be, you're going to be happy because you've done everything that you could, But sometimes the psychological side of it can come in then too.
Of course.
That's it. That you could be as fit as you need to be, but if there's a psychological barrier there, and we've crossed that road, and that seems to have improved, but like you have to know that you've done everything you possibly can, and especially if you're one of the people, a high performance athlete, you have to go to the extra length, you have to go that extra further, you have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go for them jogs, you have to maybe train 2-3 times a day, and that's what he does. He trains a lot, and for him to be the best. And it's also up to me to let him know as a parent, because he wants to be his best, the best he can be, that you won't be the best if you don't train harder than everybody else. You'll be the same as everybody else. You might have all the talent in the world still, but you have to train harder than everybody else. That's how Ronaldo's done it, Messi's done it, that's how all these boxers down through the years, the Tysons, they've all done it because they trained more than everybody else. They went that extra mile, and the fear, and everybody is fear, but you kind of have to deal with that too on the psychological level.
So I would agree with you and disagree with you with that, right? Because
I like this. We've a beer.
More insight.
like I often, I don't think it always comes down to just effort and working harder, right? You need to be very deliberate and smart about how you go about doing things as well. Like if I was to think about the work that I do, if I was to think about performance psychology, or if you were to boil it all down, like a big part of it comes down to focus is the key. Like focus is the key across everything. And like we were going back to the mindfulness piece earlier, like particularly as an elite athlete, like you need to be constantly coming back to like what happened, like how did I deal with that situation? What can I learn from that situation? What can I take forward? What do I need to adapt? What do I need to change? And yes, effort is a big part of it, but it's putting your effort into the right areas. I've worked with a lot of athletes who are phenomenal technically at whatever sport they're doing. Physically, they're incredibly strong. Like they'll understand the tactical side. They live the life, but they don't invest in as much in the mental side of it. And that's the bit that'll catch you when the pressure comes on, because that's when you revert to type. You revert to type.
And when you're tired, that's what you... Yeah, that'll catch you.
Yeah, and look, and it could be a variety of different things. Maybe they're not training under pressure enough, or they're not testing that enough. Maybe they don't have the skills or the strategies to use. So that piece of like, I think it's how you deliberately channel your energy, and you're coming back and you're looking at like, where am I getting better? And even look, in an ideal world, now this is very difficult to do. You wouldn't even think about it like, the Rudyard Kipling, that poem, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. Like if you can get into that mindset of, doesn't matter if I've won or doesn't matter if I've lost, I need to come back and I need to be very objective about it and kind of stay at that steady level. It's really, really difficult to do for us as humans, but that's often what separates the Ronaldos or the Michael Phelps or...
Can I just point out something? A lot of what you're talking about and the tools that you're talking about today will apply to people in early recovery from addictions.
Okay.
They will apply to them. It's developing these kind of tools and resources like resilience, finding people who will encourage you, support you. You can apply nearly everything you've said today to somebody who is going into early recovery. Practically everything. The focus, where do I need to put my focus today? What's my growing edge today? What's my growing edge for the next year? So somebody in early recovery, their growing edge might just be the part they might need to develop most, which for most people is developing a sense of community, developing trust in relationships. And that if you can just keep it to that for the next 6 months, but it's kind of the same practice. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
It isn't just about sport that you apply these things.
And I think another thing I would add, like with all of this is, and this is why it's so difficult and challenging, like we've all got a chimp then in our head, like you call it a chimp or you can call it whatever, like a gremlin or whatever, that's like chirping away at us all the time. And like the with that negativity bias, like it's much easier to point out.
You have your belief systems as well.
Exactly.
And conditioning and all these different things, and that's where the vocal comes from. It comes from the negativity bias on top of the belief systems that we've developed growing up, and our own capabilities, and imposter syndrome then as well on top of that.
Exactly.
You're not good enough, you never will be, you're this, you're that and the other. So there's a lot to look at, but the most important fact is just to become aware anyway. Just understand it, and that's the first step to everything. Becoming aware of it, noticing in yourself and pausing, using mindfulness and feel it, and allowing yourself to feel it, and start understanding where it's not even who you are. It's not who you are, it's not how you're supposed to be, it's just the conditioning of you. But is there anything that you'd like to maybe bring up or talk about, something that's maybe we haven't covered today?
I think I just, and maybe I move. No, we've
touched on so many different things.
Yeah, I think I'd come back to that piece about like your mindset around who you are, like, and who you want to be and who you want to stand for, and having that as the piece that directs your life.
Yeah.
Rather than it being about like the outcome. I've actually, and maybe I'll finish with this story, like something that struck me, particularly in Australia. Like I got exposed in Australia to a lot of very high level business people, been exposed to a few of them in Ireland as well, but who, and in some cases, like these people had sacrificed their kind of 20s and 30s and gone down, you know, the typical route to become a CEO or become a partner. And I was always struck by the number of people that I would have sat with. And these people could be on like insane money, like millions and millions a year, who they had gotten to where they had gotten to, and they were miserable.
Yeah.
And there was almost a sense of, this is it. This is what I did all those things for. And I'd like to see it in sport. I gave that Victoria Pendleton example earlier, but I've experienced as well with people who've scaled that mountain and kind of gone.
Yeah. There's nothing left then at the top.
No. So it's got to be about more than, and I think that's something that, you know, and I've been fortunate to work with some exceptional teams and exceptional individuals. Like it's something more and more, and researched around this area, like the greater teams and individuals seem to have, it's more about who they are. This is what I do. This is who I am.
You spoke at a conference recently. I was at it. And you put on a video at the end. And I loved it. Dan Carter.
Yeah.
Would you just if you don't mind. I know
so Dan Carter, and he's an exceptional individual, like just to study just from in terms of his mindset and how he went about things. Like he grew up small town in New Zealand, had this dream to play with the All Blacks, and he did it in, I think it was 2003, 2004. And again, this comes back to awareness. So he played that game against Italy, and he was walking off the pitch, and he was thinking to himself, I've done it, you know, I've played with the All Blacks. And then he said, okay, I had something to bring me to this point. What's the thing that's going to bring me further? And what I thought was really interesting was, rather than him thinking about, I want to win a World Cup or I want to be Player of the Year or whatever, he actually said, I want to be a great All Black. Like, what would it mean for me to be a great All Black? And he built his identity basically around that, like for the next, whatever, 10, 12 years of his career, it was, I want to be a great All Black. And you fast forward from that to 2011, he's playing, the World Cup is on in New Zealand. They're the best team in the world, but they haven't won a World Cup in 24 years. They won the first one in 87. They haven't won one since, even though in the intervening time, they've always been, pretty much for most of the time, being the number one team in the world. So it's a home World Cup. The pressure on them is enormous. And I think it was before their second game, he was just doing a drill and he collapsed, like got a very bad injury, ruled him out of the World Cup. And so he went back to his hotel room and he basically kind of thought about the situation, and he, you know, was devastated, whatever, initially the emotional impact of it. But he said, okay, I want to be a great All Black. Like my whole thing, his whole purpose or approach was not to win the World Cup. That would have been nice as an outcome of it, but it was, I want to be a great All Black. So he started asking himself the question, what does a great All Black do in this situation? And a great All Black is there for the team. A great All Black is there to support the guy who's going to take his place. He's around, can he help with the analysis? Can he help with the coaching? Can he do anything in the media around the group to support them and to help them? And I think that's it's an incredibly good example of, it's just a little shift in some ways. It's thinking about being a great All Black versus just focusing. Because if he had, my whole goal when he thought about it back in that game after his debut was, I want to win the World Cup. And this happens, like his whole world collapses then, essentially, because he's made it all about something, you know, outside of himself. So I think that's again, if I could just get that across to people, like think about who you want to be. And I loved, there's a book by a guy called James Clear called Atomic Habits.
I have it up there.
I have it up there. There you go.
There, yeah.
But anyway, he's got a line in that which I loved. He talks about this idea of like your identity, and he says, every day with your decisions and your actions, you're casting a vote for the type of person that you want to be. And he said, like, in an election, like if you were thinking about a general election, like you don't need 100% of the votes.
Yeah.
You just need more than 50. So it's not about this idea of being perfect. It's about this idea of every day, can I just even get over that 50% mark? Yeah. Can I just keep doing the things that is going to make me a healthy person? Or
it's about designing your life, is the way I'd explain it to be, as opposed to kind of drifting through and not having life happens to you. Because this is what I encourage people to do, is just like, where do I want, like how I am today is something I designed early on in my own recovery. The type of person I wanted to be, down to everything, the type of car I want to drive, the kind of clothes I want to wear, all of that stuff. It really contributes to kind of your own contentment, as opposed to kind of ending up somewhere going and not being happy with the person that you are today.
Exactly.
And it's bit by bit by bit, down to the food you eat. Yeah. Do you know?
And I think the other thing it does is, that's within your control. Yeah. Like it was in Dan Carter's control to be a great All Black. It wasn't within his control alone to win the World Cup.
Spot on. Yeah.
So it is thinking about that and how you do it for yourself.
Powerful way to finish the podcast. Listen, thanks a million, Kevin, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, it's been great chatting, and listen, I'm after learning a lot. And I'm sure a lot of the people listening at home as well, are in their cars or wherever, are going to take something from listening to you today, because a lot of us just look at sport as in
separate, maybe.
Yeah, we don't look at the psychology side of it at all, which is, from my own understanding, from just learning in the last year or so with my son, is probably more to do with it than the physical side in a big way. Like, because if somebody's mindset's not right going into whatever sport they're involved in, they will struggle, you know. And today, I think we're moving in the direction of understanding that as a society, and you know, more today than we've ever had before. And I think there are improvements still to come from it, you know. And today I got a lot, you know. I was looking forward to this conversation for a while since we spoke last time, because I knew what you were talking in a lot of sense. So listen, don't even else say.
Thanks a million, Kevin. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Welcome,
really do.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, and just thanks to Tony. And listen, Tony. If anybody wants to look up Kevin or contact you, any corporates or anything, what's the easiest way to contact you?
So we have a website, wellbeingoutfit.com.
Okay.
Or I think Donal has mentioned it there, LinkedIn.
I love my LinkedIn because I get loads of stuff off them.
If anyone wants to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to.
Or just follow you, because you do give off a lot of good stuff, a lot of information. I just love just the information, so it's a great way just to follow someone like Kevin. Just he's always putting up good posts and just little nuggets that you'll take away. So I appreciate it.
Right, so lads, thanks a million for listening. I'm Timmy Long from the Long Way Back podcast. Donal, Clifford, Kevin Clancy and Tony. God bless. Bye-bye.